And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live here on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network, here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island, the naked city. The city of, well, about 360,000 stories. We're hell bent on telling each one of them. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the Mighty Mighty Twitter, at Coalition_radio, and of course the mothership at coalitionradio.us, where you can find links to our YouTube page, links to our podcast, and of course our newish page dedicated to the civil liberty news. We are reaching out to ACLU chapters, libertarian groups, good government groups, activists, to share with us their stories and the challenges they face regularly, and reminding people that the Constitution is more than a piece of paper. It represents our natural born rights and is merely a roadmap to our civil liberties. One of the challenges of indie media is, well, logistics. We have a wonderful array of guests, some of us who join us on a regular basis. One of the challenges, of course, is scheduling them. Today we had a show record. 3 folks canceled us on us at the last minute, and 3 folks were nice enough to jump in, well, at the last minute. Folks, like the folks I'm going to talk to tonight, have jobs, families, responsibilities. Somehow they manage to find time to volunteer, to be activists, to engage, very often with causes and challenges larger than themselves. So I'm always grateful for when folks are willing to take the time and join us, particularly on a Friday night when we broadcast. We always understand, too, when things happen. One of our guests tonight is sitting in an urgent care center right now as we speak. So my hat's off to all of you. And we're appreciative whether you have to bail at the last moment or whether you're the folks who came in like the cavalry tonight to give us a show and to continue to allow us to grow as an organization and to give, well, a spotlight to people who, as we like to say, hashtag, take it very, very, very personally. My first guest for tonight is someone who embodies that. Her name is Ashley Shade. If you're a libertarian, you're already familiar with her work. If you're not, you should understand that, and as a young person, most of you are young compared to me, she's already extended herself well into the community supporting both civil liberties as well as civil liberties to the LGBTQIA community. And so I'm grateful that she joined us tonight because, quite frankly, we've been trying to make this work for months. I promise next year I'm planning on having a Pride Parade float, and I'm just going to extend the invitation right now. I hope you'll join us here in Providence for the first Coalition Radio Pride Parade float. Because Pride here in Rhode Island, the Pride Parade is a night time. It's a candlelit parade. I'll also explain in advance that I've got a very bad cold. So let me just extend a heartfelt first-time welcome to Ashley Shade. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
A little bit on your resume. You are the outreach director nationally for Outright Libertarians, which is an organization that historically supported the cause of the LGBTQIA community within the libertarian movement. And you also recently participated in a very significant event, and I'm going to ask you to tell us about that in a second. The first question I always ask first-time attendees, after tonight you will have an official status as a repeat offender. But the first question I always ask folks when they come on is, what was your liberty moment? What was that time when the light bulb went off, when that cathartic exercise, as we talked about in high school? What brought you into the liberty movement?
So that, for me, I came to the liberty movement around 2015, I would say. It's when I started really looking into libertarian ideals. Before that, I always considered myself a social moderate, financial conservative.
Right.
But then I realized that neither party really held true to my values. So in 2016, I voted for Gary Johnson. and I was very proud to be able to do so, and be able to say I cast a vote for somebody who I actually believed in what he was saying and didn't cast my vote to vote against the other people who were terrible, terrible candidates.
Terrible human beings as
So,
well.
well, yeah, that too. Unfortunately, the major parties seem to throw out lots of terrible garbage at us and just expect that we'll eat it. Um, I'd rather not. So my involvement into the Libertarian Party actually came a little over a year ago, last June. Um, I reached out to the chair of the party, Nick Sorowak, and I asked him uh, about how he felt about transgender rights, and I asked him to publicly post that transgender people were welcome in the party and that I would join the party immediately. And so he did, and I joined the party. From that point, I volunteered in the Larry Sharpe campaign, working with his policy team, specifically his policy director. Um, I am currently the treasurer of the Massachusetts Libertarian Party. Earlier this year, I had the opportunity and the pleasure to work with the Rep. Phillips 2020 campaign as their director of finance and treasurer. I left that position to do other more local work, but I wish them all the best in their campaign this year. We need a good, strong libertarian presence in this election because the other two parties are just throwing out more garbage again.
So, so
I am
what?
currently involved with Outright Libertarians. I am their deputy director of policy and outreach, and that's a new role for me. So we are still putting together everything as far as how that's going to work. It's a great opportunity for me as a transgender person to be able to work with Outright because I not only get to work with my Liberty and the Liberty movement, which I'm very passionate about, but I also get to work in bettering the lives of the LGBTQ community, which I'm also very passionate about.
Now, what's interesting to me is traditionally folks have associated with the LGBTQIA community with folks who were Democratic or the Democratic Party. Interestingly enough, we have a gentleman who joins us routinely on the show. He's the state chairman for Rhode Island of the Log Cabin Republicans, and I tease him mercilessly because of some of the more misanthropic, knuckle-dragging, single-stage thinking, mouth-breathing Republicans that are out there, and with a multi-generational history of intolerism and racism. And I routinely try to get him to the Libertarian Party. So, as someone who's transgender, someone who is obviously very, very aware politically, very sensitive to a host of issues, both in terms of civil rights and economic rights and natural rights. What would you say to folks who just seem to be hell-bent to be Democratic or hell-bent to be Republican? What does the Liberty Movement, and in particular the LP, offer to folks in that community?
For me, I consider myself an ambassador to the community. So when I talk to other LGBT people, I sit down with the conversation and I say, look, Republicans just don't care about you. That's obvious. They don't want us to exist. If they had their way, we wouldn't be here at all. So that's why LGBTQ people tend to en masse vote Democratic, because the Democratic Party, which unfortunately also doesn't care about them, at least says, we're going to give you something if you vote for us. Now, within the Libertarian Party, and here's the thing that I like to push when I'm talking to other LGBT people, is that your rights to be who you are and do what you want to do come from your birth. They're not given to you by the government. They're yours when you were born. Laws can be passed to help laws can be taken away. What we have to understand is that we really shouldn't need the laws. What we need to do is change the culture and have a culture of tolerance and acceptance. And laws don't entirely do that. Sometimes laws have a negative effect on that, and they push people to fight back even more because they feel like they're losing something. We're not here to take anything away from anybody else. When we talk about wanting gay rights or trans rights or human rights, or even minorities, when they talk about Black Lives Matter and these different rights, wanting rights, what they're talking about is they want the same opportunity in the society that a normal, straight, hetero person would have. And quite frankly, the idea of people being normal is kind of offensive to most people. It's offensive to me. I don't think anybody's normal. I don't think you can categorize people as normal. But when we talk about rights, and when I say trans rights, gay rights, what we're talking about is we want the same opportunity to participate in the society as you have. Don't tell us we can't participate just because we exist. Don't tell us we can't work, that we can't live somewhere, just because you don't like that we exist.
There's a whole range of issues that both in particular, the trans community is facing right now in terms
Yes.
of personal safety. To even the most passive observer, one should understand that there is around this country right now, seemingly, our culture has created an open license for people to make war on folks who are in the trans community. People in the trans community, are indiscriminately targeted at an exponentially higher rate than anyone else in other parts of society. And so that's when I'm confused about, again, your natural right to bear arms and your natural right to defend yourself. Democratic Party would have you believe that government is going to protect them. Government didn't protect them in Orlando. Government didn't protect them on the streets of San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, everywhere that somehow folks in the transgender community have become targets. How would you explain to folks who, and I hate to use the word indoctrinated because somehow that's, to me that's condescending. I prefer to say that someone has been steeped, immersed in a political viewpoint and may not have been exposed to other discussions. And a great one, as a disciple myself of Larry Sharpe, one of the things Larry always points out is talking about planting the seed. So long wind up to this question, so bear with me. How do you preach the right to self-defense in a community that's frankly under siege but simultaneously seems to want none of it?
Yeah, it's not the easiest conversation to have. Within the transgender community especially, there's the same distrust of cops as there is within the Black community, because transgender people are targets. The murdering of transgender people this year has been labeled an epidemic. And it is just intolerable for people to kill someone just because they're different. When I talk to LGBTQ people, and especially trans people, about gun rights, they get very shy about it. They don't like the idea of being armed, many of them. I personally want every tool available to me to defend myself, and that includes owning a weapon of my choice, and I don't want any laws passed that prohibit me to do so. But I understand there's a lot of fearfulness because that's what you're taught these days, is to be afraid of guns, be afraid of gun owners, that they're terrible things and they're just there to kill. What I would like to see happen, and something that I intend to work on, is I would like to see more trans people and more LGBTQ people in general learn basic self-defense classes. as much as I would love to be able to protect every single one of them myself, and I would gladly do so if I could, it's not possible. So I'd like to reach out to anyone who might be listening to this who might be LGBTQ, and I'd like to urge you that if you won't get a weapon to protect yourself, learn self defense. Learn how to protect yourself from risky situations. Learn how to fight back because those statistics will continue to grow as long as we don't fight back.
Allowing yourself to be at the whim of the government in order to save your life can get you killed in this country. It's
Absolutely. Absolutely. In our community, the trans community especially, one of the things they preached about at the Trans March, at the Trans Visibility March in DC that I attended, it was repeated over and over again. If there's a problem, do not go to the cops. The cops here are not our friends. And I want to reiterate that the government is not your friend either. The cops come from the government. These people are not going to save you. The courts have ruled they have no obligation to save you. They're going to sit back and watch because they don't care. And no, not all cops are terrible people, but the system is flawed and designed to protect certain people and to let the rest suffer.
right,
And until that changes, we have to be able to defend and protect ourselves.
right. And sadly, it would appear, and the numbers, of course, are vague because the government's not interested in really presenting hard numbers. It would appear that people of color in the trans community who are engaged in sex work seem to have the biggest targets on their backs of all. And
Absolutely.
so one has to say, first of all, that as we like to say in the show, hashtag sex work is work, and
Yes.
we need to decriminalize that so that folks aren't in a position where they have to negotiate between their ability to be protected by law enforcement and their ability to engage in the type of commerce that has no business being classified as a crime. So our American criminal justice system essentially takes a significant part of the trans community and puts them in a position where they have to make that decision. And, in a sense, they are bear culpability. I won't say responsibility. I'll intentionally use the word culpability. There's real culpability there for their tacit participation in this war on trans people. And let's use their words. It's war. And people are dying on the streets right now because of the stupidity and short-sightedness. So I'm with you 100%. And I guess what I'm proudest of is the Libertarian Party seems to be the only political movement in this nation that is willing to say it exactly like that. Is it?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And that's a big part of why I've joined the Libertarian Party and have immersed myself in the liberty movement, is because we believe in the rights of everybody to live their lives how they choose, to be who they want to be, and we understand that the government is not our friend. They're not going to save the day. They're not heroes. They're the villains in the story.
Right. And whereas the government's, and again, let's talk specifically of a significant historical event. There were folks who were trans at Stonewall, just like there were
Yes.
folks who were Leatherman, folks who were gay, folks who were bi. The population that found itself under attack at Stonewall represented literally every facet of the LGBT community as it existed at that time.
Absolutely.
The fact that we celebrate rights, and as you can tell where I'm going here, I'm going to get into a contentious area. The fact that we celebrate the rights of some while seemingly marginalizing the rights and safety of others seems to be an act of political convenience that also has no place. Now, there was an event in Boston, I know we didn't talk about this ahead of time, that I just wonder if you and I were talking at the time, and logistical reasons, your work and everything else prevented us. The fact that I am only on a Friday night, and I always, as always, I apologize to my guests for that. Someday we'll be a 5-night-a-week show. We will be, and someday we're going to do a coalition after dark. I'm convinced of that, but you felt very strongly about that event in Boston, and I wonder if you could just take a moment and give voice to that.
Yeah, so I understand the people behind it wanting to be able to say, well, there's a gay pride events that go on all the time. We should be able to talk too. I get that, and I'm okay with that. But the event wasn't about them having or exercising freedom of speech. The event was created purposefully to incite LGBTQ communities and left wing people, and hoping that they would react violently so they could gain more support from other people who disagree with the LGBTQ community. There's a difference between exercising free speech and trying to incite violence or trying to troll a group of people. And what the straight pride people don't understand is that uh, pride events were founded from the Stonewall riots, which were actually led by two black trans women. Uh, but pride comes from those riots. Pride is a form of celebrating not being oppressed by the police officers who used to raid gay bars and clubs and arrest people for being homosexual and engaging in gay acts. Pride is about the progress we've made that gay people are no longer beaten and murdered on a daily basis. They no longer have to hide. And unfortunately, in some places, they are still beaten, they are still murdered, and they do still need to hide. And within the trans community, that's especially true. 18 trans women have been murdered in the United States in 2019. 17 of the 18 were women of color. Just recently, there was an incident in Jacksonville, Florida, where a trans woman was beaten, roped to a truck, and dragged through the streets of Jacksonville. I do not know what the status of that person is at this time. Last I knew, they were in the hospital, and I hope for a speedy recovery. But this is still happening in the United States in 2019. And unfortunately, the current administration has made things, has radicalized people on both sides to proportions that just are out of control. They make people brave, and they make people do stupid things. And it's not okay to, especially as libertarians, to try to incite violence from other people.
It's literally against our code.
Yes, we have a NAP for a reason, the non-aggression principle. And we are not the party of violence. I personally am against violence with everything I am, unless I need to defend myself or my family or my property. And I believe that most libertarians agree with that. To try to incite violence purposefully is just wrong. And that was my main objection to the event. That a person who was formerly in the Libertarian Party would help organize the event to try to incite other people to be violent was just abhorrent and disgusting and tasteless, in my view.
Understood. Let me take a swing at something, and you can tell me if I got it right, if I'm wrong, what your opinion is. The reason why you have pride, organizations that end in the word pride, or the reason that you have organizations that end in the word matter, is because and whereas quote unquote mainstreamed organization groups of people, whether it be based on their ethnicity, any one of 100 reasons, their sexuality. The reason why you have a Black Lives Matter is because in the year 2019, where a man died because he was selling loose cigarettes, and another man died under questionable circumstances in Ferguson, Missouri. And just this week, a police officer executed a man of color and received half the sentence, if you will, or a third of the sentence that someone in another part of the country received for killing an
Mhm.
animal. We have to remind ourselves that folks in marginalized communities matter.
Yes.
And we have to remind folks that there are folks in marginalized communities that have pride. I don't need to remind people that white lives matter. Of course, white lives matter. Duh. I mean, yeah, white lives matter. Every life matters. We know that. It's just that these target populations are not targets. They don't.
Hmm.
They don't literally have a target on their back. As if you're, I've interviewed on this show a number of middle-aged women of color who, some were successful professionally, others weren't. Some were in poor communities, others were in the upper middle class, if not outright wealthy. All of whom had had the conversation with their young children, particularly if they were young boys or teenagers, on how to react to situations so as not to die.
Hmm.
That's not a conversation I had to have with my white daughters in a scenic little suburb of Providence, Rhode Island. I just haven't had to do that. And yet, if you're a young man of color and you're a parent who has a child who's a young man of color, you damn well better have that conversation. And the fact that we have to do that in 2019 is astonishing. And the fact that we still can't, seemingly a significant portion of the population can't seem to understand that a difference in sexuality does not define the worth of an individual. And that, what's the word, the dog whistles that come from particularly people in the Trump administration, the fact that someone at the highest levels of government would even dabble in that type of behavior is just disgusting. And I don't know in the minutia of this current cycle of outrage porn if those bigger issues like that are being lost. That's my explanation of it. What do you think?
I completely agree. Marginalized communities are going to stand up and be proud of who they are, and they're going to tell you that we're here and we're not going away. And they have to do that because society is set up to try to shove them off to the side and make them go away. We as humans try to remove anything that makes us uncomfortable, anything that's different, out of the ordinary than what we're used to. And we cannot do that with people. It's not okay to say that just because someone looks different or believes in something different than I do, that they should be excluded from society, that they should be harmed or killed. Those are outrageous ideas. They're not okay in any form of society. They're not okay anywhere around the world. We're all human beings. We all have thoughts, dreams, hopes, feelings. We all bleed. We will all eventually die. Why are we still fighting each other on sexuality, on color, on religion, on race, on any of these things? Why aren't we working together to make our society better for all of us? Why does it have to be better for just some people and not others?
And I'm proud of the fact that the Libertarian Party has multiple caucuses that appeal and that support the rights of multiple causes. We have,
Absolutely.
we have an Islamic and Muslim caucus. We have a radical caucus. We have outright libertarians who work aggressively, like yourself, to educate the public, really on both sides, because you're spending as much time reaching out to members of the LGBT community who have yet to find a real political home, they may not know yet, as you are reaching out to other people in other communities to preach tolerance, aren't you?
Yeah, I believe it's important to not judge people based on their religion, not judge people based on their skin color or sexuality or gender. Judge people, if you're going to judge them on their character and their actions.
Now, there was a big event just a week or so ago in D.C. That you participated in, and the Libertarian Party nationally, from folks from the national office and a few other activists got together and joined us. Why don't you tell us about that, if you could?
Yeah, so last Saturday was the first ever National Transgender Visibility March
Hmm.
held in Washington, D.C. We got a contingent together at the last minute. I was actually sponsored by Outright to Go, so I want to really thank Outright again for doing so. They also sponsored a few other people to get out there for us. And we also had some people from the area and from National LP join us for this event. And this event was very powerful because this event was about honoring those people who have been murdered. I'm talking about how we fix this, how we are not just going to go away and crawl back under a rock. We're not going to let you pretend we don't exist. And we are going to participate in the society just like everybody else.
Hmm.
Now, there are things there that they ask for that I don't entirely agree with. They ask for laws to be passed. And that to me, for as a libertarian, that's a difficult situation for me to ask for a law to be passed. Because I don't trust the government to, even if the law is passed, I don't trust the government to do it properly anyway.
Right.
However, in a sense, I agree with Larry Sharp when he uh, came out in support of gender at the time during his campaign, and he said when when communities who are marginalized at disproportionate rates are being attacked and harmed by the society, sometimes we have to put a temporary solution in place until we can change the society and change the culture.
It's a difficult proposition. Again, who would think in the year 2019 that we would still be having debates over racial inequality?
Absolutely. Like, for example, the transgender community, the unemployment rate in the transgender community is higher than any other, especially transgender women of color. Transgender people tend to work in sex work predominantly more than any other group of people because
Hmm.
they can't get jobs in regular office settings or anywhere because they are discriminated against. And legally, you can be fired for being transgender. There are actually still states where you can be fired at a job for revealing that you're gay. How does your sexuality or your gender matter in your job performance? It doesn't. There are places that can discriminate against housing for trans and gay folks in the United States.
Hmm.
Should you really be able to say, no, you can't live here, you can't live in our community, uh, to be excluded from the society? All we want is the opportunity to be a part of the society just like everyone else.
Right.
Most of us just want to be able to work. Most of us just want to be able to feed our families. Most of us just want to live day to day lives like everybody else.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, we're pushed to the side and told, no, you're different, so we don't want you here.
Right.
Now, I can tell you that before I transitioned, at every job interview I'd ever had, I was offered a job. Since transitioning over 5 years ago, that is no longer the case. And part of that, even though I live in Massachusetts, where you would think it's more commonly accepted, part of the reason I believe that I didn't get the same offers is because I'm transgender. Part of it also has to do with being female.
Right.
So there's still a long way to go in the United States when it comes to allowing everybody the liberty and the freedom to just be themselves, to participate in the society, to contribute, and to be good people.
Hmm. How how do folks who are political activists, who I would imagine are just, let me make a broad paint with a broad brush here. I would imagine that most of the folks in the transgender community who are politically active um, are overwhelmingly Democratic.
Yes,
I have yet to ever meet, and I'm that's you can. I'm almost judgmental in saying this. I've ever yet to meet a Republican individual who is transgender. I maybe it's just because I don't have a wide enough circle of friends. I don't know, but
I've met a few. They exist. They do exist.
okay. How do folks, particularly who are overtly Democratic, react to you preaching liberty as really a superior alternative to folks who are in the transgender community?
It's difficult because there's issues that we can agree upon. There are many issues that we can agree upon. Usually they're non-economic ones.
Right.
So when I talk to them about police and how police are not our friends, they're all on board on that.
Right.
When we talk about immigration and how the Libertarian Party is open borders, most of them are on board with that. A lot of trans Democrats tend to be the more extreme socialists. They don't like capitalism. They don't like the system as it is, and they're confused. They don't understand that the system we have now is not actually capitalism, it's crony corporatism.
Right.
Because the government is completely in ties with the system. That's not capitalist. They kind of think that capitalism goes with that, and they tend to be socialists. Therefore, they run with the Democratic Party. In my conversations with many of them, I try to talk about things that we do relate with. I try to work with them on LGBTQ issues. I try to work with them on community issues. And then I slowly introduce, well, if you think about it, the cops aren't our friends, right? We all agree on that? Yeah, okay. Well, the cops come from the government, so the government really isn't our friends either. And those conversations tend to go one way or another. But the thing is, what I've found is that I have been able to have these conversations with people who normally wouldn't give a libertarian the time of day to even talk to them.
Right.
So at least they're willing to have the conversation. At least they're willing to listen. And I'm not going to judge them based on their political beliefs. If I did that, I wouldn't talk pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, deep is the irony that FOSTA and SESTA were overwhelmingly supported by some significant players in the left of center Democratic movement. In fact, I'm trying to remember if any of them didn't vote it. Yet I can't think of particularly for folks in the transgender community. Again, transgender men and women of color who disproportionately find economic support in the sex worker community. I can't think of a single issue that was more damaging, and a community who was more damaged by that law than those folks. I mean, it's just
Absolutely.
I mean, it took a difficult situation, and literally, people are dying for it. I mean, there's no other way to put it. I point that out to Bernie supporters, and I point that out to the Variety supporters, and it's interesting because Mayor Pete, I don't think has been very overt. I don't think the media has really taken him to task on FOSTA and SESTA. A, because he's a mayor, he wasn't involved in the legislation, but B, I think it's ignorance, intentional ignorance. They don't want to cover the more challenging issues. They'd rather engage in cult of personality. And that's frustrating.
That goes back to me saying that the Democratic Party, the reason why minorities tend to vote Democratic is because the Republicans just don't give a crap at all, and they'll tell you to your face, we don't care about you, we don't want you here, and we're going to attack you. And that's personal. So what do? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. You join with the Democrats who are saying, okay, we'll give you a little bit if you vote for us, but we'll beat them who just want you to just go away and die. So that's why I think the Democratic Party draws in a lot of LGBTQ people, but the Democratic Party just doesn't care about your rights as an individual. They're just going to say, okay, well, we'll use the government to try to protect this if you vote for us, but we don't care really about what you want. I mean, in 2008, just 11 years ago, Democrats had candidates who were against gay marriage. So the Libertarian Party has had that as part of its plank since its inception.
Right.
So,
Ironic. One needs to sometimes refresh people's memories. Barack Obama himself was unwilling to support marriage equality until, as we used to refer to him back then, crazy Uncle Joe Biden made a couple of gaffes in the media that committed him to it. It forced the issue. That doesn't happen. Barack continues to hide because ultimately you've got issues within the African American community itself on how they look at folks who are in the LGBTQIA community. So I mean,
yes.
and to whom Mr. Obama, and I don't engage in any of the crap that people. I don't come up with nicknames. I don't. I just. I don't engage in the hate. I loathe his policies, but let's just be blunt. That was an issue he was perfectly happy to avoid, if he could have.
Yes. Yes. And eventually he, as they say, he went along with it because the base decided it was time to go along with it. It wasn't about actually helping LGBTQ people, because if he wanted to do that, he would have done it during his first term when he first took office. It would have been an issue for him. It wasn't. It wasn't a priority. We're never priorities. We're only priorities when people need votes.
Right. We've only got a couple minutes left, and I want to thank you so much for joining us, and we will continue this conversation. But what is, you've taken on this new role as getting intimately involved in outreach for the Outright Libertarian Caucus, and again, that encompasses a broad cross section, if you will, of the LGBTQ community. What are some of your plans, or what are some of your ideas on how to get the party to reach out to folks in anticipation, both of the coming elections, but also just of getting folks to understand that there's an alternative out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I really am excited to work on is part of the policy that goes with the outreach. And one of the policies that we really want to push, there has been a lot of push lately in states about having a third gender on IDs, Gender X. One of the policies we at Outright want to push and have our libertarian candidates push is to have gender removed completely from identification. Gender has no place on identification unless you want to discriminate against somebody, whether they're male or female or not. Somebody's genitals have absolutely nothing to do with IDing them, and it's completely unnecessary that the government would define somebody's gender to begin with. So we'd like to work on policy, and we'd like libertarian candidates to support this policy to have gender completely removed from state and federal identification.
That's as we say, that's libertarian AF. And what a great way of encapsulating how we think.
Yes.
We folks all the time ask us about marriage equality. We don't overtly support a behavior. What we support, and I think people misunderstand this, we support the right for you to make the choice in your behavior.
Yes.
And to me, that's a critical differentiation. We trust you to make your own choices. We don't need to continue to be engaged in a permission society where society decides that you have to ask for permission to be transgender. That the society has to allow you to identify in a gender, and the fact that you have to identify as a gender. That's outstanding. I love that. That's great stuff. Keep us in the loop on that. How we can, how we the coalition, we're a little hardy little bunch here, but how we can amplify that message, because that's as good as it gets.
Not only is it a libertarian policy issue, not only can all libertarians get behind that message, but it also helps the LGBTQ community at the same time.
Right.
And people from all parties should be able to get behind that message. And the people who don't get behind that message, well, you just found out who the statists are.
Well, history will look back and with a quizzical glance and an embarrassed laugh at you if you can't allow folks to fundamentally choose their own directions.
Well, Think about it this way. The main uses for your ID are to cash checks when you get pulled over by a police officer, to fill out documentation. Does anybody actually need to know what your genitalia are to do any of those things?
Nope.
So why do we have it on our identification? It's common sense. We don't need it.
Yeah. No, I'm completely with you. I love the idea. Well, how can folks find you on the net? How can folks find Outright on the net? Give us a way that folks can reach out and connect with you. You know, if they hear this tonight or if they hear this in podcast form.
Absolutely. So I'm mainly on the net through Facebook. You can look me up by my name, Ashley Shade. My profile is pretty public. You can find Outright on Facebook, Outright Libertarians. You can also find us on the web at outrightusa.org. And we would love to have your support. We'd love for you to join us. I'd also like to give a quick shout out to the Kevin Hale Congressional Campaign in Texas, where I'm working as Director of Finance. Kevin, keep giving them Hale. And I look forward to speaking to you again. Thank you so much for having me.
No, hey, listen, you are a warrior, a liberty warrior. You have, you know, for you to accomplish what you're accomplishing at such a young, it's just outstanding. So you know, our hearts and our minds are with you, and of course, allow us the opportunity to amplify your efforts. And again, you grace us by joining us tonight. So I thank you for coming on a Friday evening. Now it's time to get back to work, so get back to work. Listen, Ashley Shade, she is the outreach policy guru, one of the policy gurus at Outright Libertarians. She is the treasurer of the Massachusetts Libertarians, and she's also a hell of a nice person. So, you know, get behind her, follow her, and let's march alongside with her as we approach the next stage of our party and our movement's growth. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break right now. We are the coalition. Outrage Porn, Civilly Disobedient Media, broadcasting live here in La Prave, the Naked City. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the Mighty Mighty Twitter at Coalition_Radio, and of course, CoalitionRadio.us. Stay tuned. We've got another emergency replacement. Elliot Axelman is joining us after a long time away. We've got him back in the fold. He's going to try and link up with us. He's up at the Free State Project in New Hampshire. He's going to talk for a few minutes about that and get him back in the fold here. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.